Hi, my name is Hannah Zabel. I am a 7th and 8th grade teacher in Kissimmee, Florida. So I'm right near Orlando, right near Disney World. I moved from Wisconsin to Florida in about January, taught for 1 quarter, COVID hit, and then I started teaching from home.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, everybody. This is another episode on the challenges and triumph of online teaching during COVID-19 at the Female Educators Roundtable with your host, Debby Enoe from Teacher Success Coach, and my guest who just introduced herself. Today, we'll be looking at another area in relationship to teaching online. And it's really been challenging, especially now that some people have gone back to school, the physical classroom, and some of us are going back in September and some are going back in August, etc. It is so interesting the way the paradigm have shifted and people's mindsets have changed. Because when parents were supporting the children at home through the lockdown, they were praising educators, how well they've been doing, and they never realized that they do so much, and they're super this and they're super, etc., etc. Now that we are demonstrating that, like every other human beings out there who are concerned about this virus and who are anxious about the virus, we are also demonstrating that fact. But instead, we are criticized. The press and everybody else seems to have it that we don't want to go back to school. We are too demanding, who we think we are. People keep on saying that we are superhero. We're not super anything. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a everything. I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, etc., like everybody else out there. And we also have a right to be anxious because we're human like everybody else. But unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. And the other sad thing about it is everybody seems to know what is right for educators, except educators themselves. Nobody seems to ask us any question. Everybody seems to think that it is okay to have physical distance in the classroom. They're forgetting that in the classrooms, there are 35 plus children. So therefore, that in itself would be very challenging because we don't even know what it's going to look like. No one have actually sat down and asked teachers or asked educators what their thoughts are. You have the presidents, you have the prime minister, you have legislators, you have MPs, you have everybody, the education department, everybody know what is best for the teachers and the children, except the teachers and the children themselves. No one asks us what our thoughts are. No one say, okay, how do you think this is going to work? Instead, everybody's telling us how it's going to work. They're not in the classroom, we are. And I think that is what is missing. People are forgetting to ask the person who it relates to. Because, for example, people would ask the doctors what the prognosis are. They're going to be asking the lawyers what they think the court should do. But nobody's asking the teachers what would it look like and what schools should do. So the purpose of the platform is to hear from educators themselves what our thoughts are teaching online and now that we're going back into the physical classroom. Hannah, can you share with us your experience of teaching online in relationship to engagement, self-care, everything else that we deal with in the classroom itself?
I struggled quite a bit when we moved from in-person to online teaching, partially Part of the reason for that was I didn't know these students very well. I had only been with them for about 9 weeks before we were basically forced to go online, which I believe was the right decision at the time.
Mm.
My engagement was extremely low. I set up weekly Zoom meetings, put all my lessons online, but I had very few students who would actually come to the Zoom meetings, or the few that did come to the Zoom meetings, they weren't really interested or able to hold a conversation. So a lot of the times it felt like I was just teaching to cyberspace because I didn't have that good interaction or that community with the students. Thankfully, there were quite a few students who, if they didn't make it to a Zoom meeting and they had questions, they would still call me or email me or ask me questions. But quite a few students I didn't really hear from until the last week or two before school ended because they were struggling to get enough work in to have a passing grade. And one of the unfortunate things about what our school decided to do was if the student turned in any work, they passed. So I'm going to be teaching students who, based on their work, based on their scores, should probably be in a remedial program, but instead they're just kind of bumped up to the next grade.
Wow. So when you get into the physical classroom, what's some of the challenges that you could see happening?
Right now, I will have 9 students in my classroom, and I will have 10 who will be virtual. My school has let the parents make the decision. So I think part of the challenge is going to be the space, because social distancing, even with 9 students, I don't think that's going to be easy because they haven't seen each other in a long time. They're a very emotional group and really rely on physical contact for kind of comfort. So it will be very difficult trying to tell them, like, you cannot share your supplies, you cannot be near people. And the other challenge, as far as a physical aspect, is we are required by the state to take the students' temperatures before we let them into the classroom each day. So morning routines are always very hectic, and we add having to take temperatures of every single student who walks into the classroom before we can really begin our day. So I think it will be even more of a madhouse between 8 and 8:20 when the kids are in their rooms, not necessarily as supervised as they could be, while the teachers are trying to control outside, taking temperatures, and inside, getting their students prepared for the day.
Wow. And we are talking about that's going to be one teacher.
Yes.
Interesting. Interesting. When you're on the platform, you had said that the connection, you did not have engagement. Why do you think that was the case?
A lot of my students were not very interested in school. Even in the classroom, they weren't very engaged. And I had difficulties trying to get my students to complete their work and complete it on time when I was even physically with them. So when we went to virtual learning, it's like that was kind of the last thing on their minds. But I live in a poorer area, so a lot of the families didn't have the resources that they needed. And there were a few families where they have 4 or 5 kids at our school, and the students could not be on they only had one device for 6 kids.
Mhm,
So they had to kind of pick and choose what teacher and what lesson was the most important at that time.
Wow. So therefore, it's not so much, there are two factors here because your student wasn't engaging anyway in the physical classroom.
Mhm.
And the other fact, because the fact that they were not engaging, so therefore when they come onto this platform, I'm sure they see it as holiday start early.
Yes.
So therefore there's no way you could be saying to them, okay, come on, you guys, you need to submit work, you need to do your work. They're not interested because it's holiday, come early. The fact that they weren't interested in school anyway, could you imagine you want to tell them now to do work?
And I sent quite a few emails and text messages and phone calls to parents saying, hey, your student hasn't turned any work yet. And that's where it got kind of to the end 2 weeks where some students were scrambling to submit anything so they could pass on to the next grade.
Yeah, but on the other hand, the child who is in a house with 4 or 5 other siblings, it's really challenging for them to be able to do any work because there's only one device for all of them and they all need to use it. So what did you do in a situation like that?
With that situation, I made sure to record more of my lessons and give more detailed directions. So if they couldn't watch me live, they could always go back and review later. I also gave out my personal email and my personal cell phone number to all my parents and all my students. And I feel like I bonded and got to know some of the parents better because they knew I was there. They knew I was willing to communicate and talk to them. So I found that helpful. And I think that was reassuring to some of my students to know that they could call me and I would answer my phone.
Yeah, because that was my next question. I was going to ask you, how did you, find your parents? But as you say, you find that you bonded more with the parents, on the online platform. That's interesting. That's interesting.
And I think a lot of the parents were also just as frustrated with the situation and also scrambling to figure out the technology as well.
So did you find that you had to coach parents in terms of how to use the platform?
Yes and no. I used Google Classroom mostly, and I have used Google Classroom for a long time. So I made some videos at first, just kind of my screen showing this is where this is, hit this button, log in. And that cut down on some of the questions, but I did still have to help a few, but that was very, very simple, very pointed questions.
Yeah. That was a fantastic idea, actually, doing the videos, because it means that, they could actually look at the video while they're trying to log on because they've got something right there. Because many times when you actually take a parent through the platform, when you actually finish with them, they're already forgotten, what, like all of us, what they meant to do next. So at least they had the video to go back and review and have a look at it, which is very good. That's very good. That's a very good idea. Very good. How did you deal with behavior problem on this online platform? Were there any behavior issue?
I actually had the opposite problem because when I would have Zoom meetings that were not educational, just for students to get the chance to talk to each other and just see each other's faces, they did not really communicate. They just kind of sat there and stared at the camera.
Oh, wow.
So that was very, very odd to me. So I ended up creating like games that we would play on there. So we played like Two Truths and a Lie or Would You Rather. So the students were at least talking about something rather than just kind of deer in the headlights.
Oh my goodness. So in terms of putting on the camera, what was your policies on putting on the camera?
That is something that I did not do well at, that I will have to be more careful with this upcoming school year, because I didn't lay out the expectations, like you need to be in a quiet place, you need to have your camera on. So there was one young man who was there, he had his sound on, he had his camera on, but he was sitting in his room with his shades drawn. So like I could see this much of his forehead, but like everything else was just pitch black.
Wow.
So I know that that's those expectations of our Zoom meetings. I will have to be better at communicating what I'm looking for.
Yeah, but you could have gone back and, and tell them the next day, because what some educators do is, you set out the expectation and then something else crop up, because don't forget, when you're on this platform, something else crop up. So therefore you have to say to them, and now this is another expectation. This is what I don't want you to do. Because something one educator says, well, some of the students were writing on the screen and she did not know how to get rid of it. So when she actually got it sorted, she said to them, yes, and you are not allowed to write on the screen. So that was a new expectation in light of what you actually saw have taken place. Because we, in the physical classroom, we would lay out our ground rules because we know what to expect. But on this online platform, we don't know what to expect. We just ad-libbing it as we go along.
And kids are so creative.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can always find a new way to try and make their lesson more fun.
Yeah,
exactly. But thankfully, I didn't have too much of that in my Zoom meetings.
Okay. Oh yeah, because you use Google platform anyway, and Google platform is, it doesn't it has its own challenges, but not some of those, which is quite good. In terms of confidence, how did you find the student confident was on the online platform? What were they like in terms of the confidence? One of the things, I'm just visualizing your student, the non-engagement, it would do my head in.
Most of my students did very well with submitting their assignments and creating new documents and basically just getting their work done. So I would say most of my students kept the same level of work online as they were doing in the classroom. But I did have those few who didn't really engage and didn't really do the work that I provided for them. So all in all, I think the vast majority of my students did the best that they could have done in the situation. And that's something I look forward to kind of praising them for and sharing with them once I get to see them in the classroom, because they really exceeded my expectations.
Okay. So how did you get the parents' involvement? Well, the parents really, as you said to me earlier on, some of the parents, you told them that the child was not attending, and what did they do about it?
Unfortunately, a lot of the parents that I work with are full-time, maybe even work 2 jobs. So in quite a few cases, it was my students, like my 7th and 8th graders, who were in charge of their younger siblings. So I would email a parent or text a parent or call a parent and just say, like, how can I help you? What's going on? And some of them were able to fix the problem, kind of motivate their student a little bit more, but there were still some who kind of trailed or didn't really have the opportunity or the means of motivating their child.
How did you learn the online platform? Did your school supported you in doing that? What happened?
We ended up kind of choosing our own method of communicating with our parents.
Okay.
So the kindergarten through 4th grade, their classroom had already been set up with Class Dojo.
Okay.
So most of their videos and messages went out using Class Dojo. And I chose Google Classroom because I was the most familiar with that. Um, so I didn't really need training because I'd kind of known the background of it and how it worked. And the grades under me, they had been using Dojo the whole year. So we just kind of continued with what we know. Now, this year, my school is changing to a new platform and we're getting training on that. And it also kind of streamlines the process because everyone is using the same program. So it should be simpler for the teachers to manage and also simpler for the parents to kind of get used to rather than hopping around between Dojo and Classroom.
So which means, thank you. So which means that you only use one platform. So you did not get resources for your teaching from other platforms.
No, not really. I ended up creating a lot of my own work and basically all of my assignments, and then typing them out, transferring them, and assigning them using Classroom.
Okay. Were you able to use your resource from the classroom onto the online platform in terms of your lessons, your lesson plan? Was it easily transferable? What's the situation with that?
We are still learning our new platform, so I don't know the answer to that question yet.
No, I meant that the platform that you were using, which was Google Classroom, I'm saying to you, what you use in the physical classroom, were you able to easily transfer it onto the online platform?
Yes, I was, because I do most of my prep work using Google Docs and Google Suites. So they transfer back and forth. So in that way, I was very happy to have been more familiar with Google because I was able to work back and forth. So that section of the technology wasn't difficult for me. It was more finding a good service for recording videos and transferring those to my students. So I tried using Facebook chat, I tried using Zoom, I tried using Skype and Big Blue Button. And what I eventually ended up doing was recording my videos on Zoom, but I had to buy a new headset with a better mic on it.
Okay. And did that work though? When you actually did the video on Zoom, you did the video on Zoom and then you transferred it onto Google Classroom?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And that worked for the most part. There were some students who weren't able to access the videos, so then I had to email the videos to them individually.
Right. But at least you know that there is some way that it is compatible in terms of, Google Classroom with Zoom is compatible. So you could just do it on Zoom and just, transfer it onto the Google Classroom, which is good. Right. What are some of the other challenges you had? Because you say it was really difficult for you using the online platform. What were the challenges?
Well, my situation was very unique, because when COVID started, I was living with a host family.
Okay.
So during that time, I was also trying to find a place for myself to live. I was teaching subjects that were brand new to me with like brand new materials. So I was teaching upper level math, which I had never done before, trying to create social studies projects that my kids could do basically independently, as well as teaching trying to teach Shirley English online was very, very challenging. So part of it was transferring all those materials and resources into a platform that the students could use and actually complete their assignments in. And part of it was me trying to stay a step in front of what my students were learning. And in addition to that, it was the kind of the loneliness of being in lockdown and not being able to see my students or see my coworkers.
So how did you overcome the fact that, you had to do all this new training material? So what did how did you cope with that?
I cried a lot the first few weeks, just because it was so overwhelming. And my administration was also trying to learn things and cope basically with these massive changes. So especially at the beginning, it felt like I was getting more criticism than any appreciation of you're trying, you're doing what you can do. I always felt like it was, oh, you need to do this better. So eventually I just found a system that worked for me. I started listening to the parents more and like the parents' opinion of things because they were the ones working with it, and kind of just talking on the phone with parents and just asking like, is this working for you? What do I need to change? So one of the ways that helped me is I started listening to like my parents and my students more who are working with what I had created versus what my admin was telling me I was doing wrong.
And then you find, I find one of the things is we need to listen to our students more because they're the one who actually get in the material. They're the one that know whether or not they understand the material. They're the one that know that, is this working for them? So that's one of the reasons why I feel as educators, we need to constantly be asking our students and constantly listening to them to hear what they're saying to us, how we need to adapt things. Because on the online platform, that was what it was all about, adaptation. So so how many hours did you teach online? What time to what time did you operate office hours? And the student that didn't make it, what did you do? So did you operate office hours and how did you?
So technically my office hours were 8 to 3 every day. So I wasn't online teaching that whole time, but students were able to call me during those hours. Now I say technically because the phone calls or the texts that I got from students normally didn't come to me until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I answered them because that was the time that worked for them. The only one I didn't answer was when a student called me at 1 o'clock in the morning to ask me a question about a math problem. And I answered my phone without looking at it because there could be any reason why someone was calling me. So they're like, I need help with problem 87. And I just said, please call me back tomorrow.
Exactly.
So I did a lot of recording videos rather than teaching live. But Monday mornings were really the time when I was online constantly recording my videos, being prepped for any questions that students would have. So I kept my office hours. I did a lot of recording, but as far as live lessons, I didn't do a lot of live teaching.
Why is that? Why is that?
Because a lot of the work that my students were doing, they could do independently. Like for example, the Shirley lessons. I recorded my Shirley lessons on Sundays and posted them on Monday, and then kind of stacked those videos throughout the week. Because those were also lessons that needed a lot of repetition.
Okay.
So I would have to say the same thing 2 or 3 times for them to absorb it and basically process it. And I felt like that was the best way to do it. So if they needed to hear it again, they could just jump back and listen to it. And I also made that decision based on how many students weren't coming when I was teaching live.
Okay.
So when I was teaching live, I maybe had 5 students out of 25 who came.
Whoa.
And those were 20 students who then had no access to my lessons afterwards.
So how did those students catch those lessons? Oh, because you did it on video, so they were able to go back and look at the video lessons.
And they were able to watch that video while they were doing their work.
Okay. That's, it shows that you have to have more than one method of making sure that you do your work for the students, because the fact is you're doing the live, they're not coming, they come in when they want to. So in terms of differentiation, in terms of flexibility, as educator, you really had to be flexible.
Yes. And have to be willing to work outside my office hours. And I found myself that I was grading a lot easier than I would have been, where I know that some students inside the classroom probably could have worked to a higher level. But a lot of what I graded was, did you do the assignment? Did you follow the directions? Okay, you get a passing grade on it, which is unfortunate because then the students don't get specific praise and they don't grow in their knowledge or understanding.
That's very true. That's very true, because they were working towards the assignment. That's all they were working to, isn't it? So how did you assess the students? You had said earlier on that, as long as they got a pass. So what were you judging the pass on? Is it understanding? What were you judging that pass on?
The pass was judged on whether or not they turned something in. So unfortunately, we weren't really looking at grades. We were just looking at, did they do the homework? Which that was a decision that I was not happy with, but unfortunately, that was a decision that I didn't really have a place to argue. So it was, if the students do their homework, doesn't matter how they do it, they pass.
I see quite a lot of dangers in that, because they do the homework, but they didn't do it to a relevant standard that they should do in order to pass. Because in the physical classroom, with a student doing that piece of work, you'll be saying to them, hold on, you need to do this over. It's not, it's not the quality I expect.
Right. And when they're not in the classroom, there's no method of keeping them in for part of their recess to finish something. There's no option of keeping them after school to help them. They're only able to do as much as a teacher can do through the internet. So in many ways, I wasn't able to support or discipline my students like I needed to, or like I would have wanted to.
Yeah, that's one of the hard challenge of online platform. The lack of discipline or inability to discipline the students, because we cannot connect with them. We cannot see eye contact. The eye contact doesn't mean the same thing as when they're in the physical classroom. So it really is challenging in terms of engaging with the student and seeing their eye contact, etc. It's also, what I find alarming is the method by which you guys are assessing. Did you have to assess? Because it's not I do not feel that it is a fair way of assessing. What are your thoughts on that?
It definitely was not a fair way of assessing because there were two students in my class, extremely high achieving
Mhm.
and just very, very bright, hardworking students. And they did all of their assignments to the best of their ability. Where on the other side, I had students who turned in maybe 3, 4 assignments, and they also basically received the same grade as those who had done everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it definitely was not fair. And I think those students who didn't do their work are going to suffer for it, sadly, in this upcoming year.
Yeah, yeah.
And quite a few of those students who didn't complete their work last year have opted to do virtual learning again.
Okay, 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 okay.
So I am concerned that it's going to kind of be a repetition of last year, that they'll scramble at the last minute to turn their assignments in, while not staying standard or consistent throughout the rest of the time period.
Yeah, that's the thing for me as an educator, and I'm sure you too, consistency, because, it defeats the object for them actually, want to do crash things straight away. And that, did you really understand what I've taught in this piece of work you submitted? You know, the other thing that crossed my mind is, how do you know the assessment that is produced are the assessment of the students? Bearing in mind, you did not have a lot of time with them, enough to judge their full capability and the potential and what they're likely to do, etc. So how did you negotiate that particular aspect?
I relied a lot on my coworkers who knew these students and who had them the year before. So I ended up sending out a lot of emails and a lot of work samples, basically just asking, is this typical of this student?
Okay.
And that was very helpful because it also gave me kind of a baseline. And now I even know more what to look for when we start back up in a few weeks.
It's interesting though. The good thing is at least you had the other educators to bounce off ideas. There's sometimes you're going into a call, there's no one else. You're all in the same time teaching this student. And the student is handing work and you're in doubt and thinking, okay, I've not seen any of his work yet, but judging from his conversation, I really don't think that he's capable right now to do that. You're not saying that he's not capable at all, but you're saying right now that he's not capable of producing that piece of work. So you do have to question the parental involvement. And I'm afraid we do have parents that get too involved.
Yeah, there were a few assignments that I found where it was clearly not the student who had done the work.
So what can you do? What do you do in a situation like that?
In those situations, I just did not count that assignment.
Okay.
So
okay.
that on an assignment that I could tell that the student did not do it, I just did not enter that in the records or in the grade book.
Okay, so does the student have an opportunity to resit it?
No, I didn't go through that because there wasn't any concrete way of me proving, I guess, that the student did not do that. And I didn't want to get into a conflict with any parents about, I think that you did this, rather than, it was just a confrontation that I was just not willing to have at that time.
Yeah. Then sometimes we have to choose our battles.
Yes, exactly. And that was a battle that I was not up for fighting at that point in time.
Yes, sometimes we just have to leave it. You see, my thing is, because you said that you were not too strict on putting your cameras on, right? And the question is, you don't know who was behind the screen. It could be a parent behind the screen, sitting there for the child.
Right. Which is why I'm going to have to be more careful with those expectations for our Zoom meetings.
Mm. So when you go back in September, or when you go back at the end of the month, are you guys going to be transitioning to Zoom, or you guys are going to be using Google Classroom?
We are leaving that up to each teacher. So I believe most teachers will be using Zoom. I know I will be continuing to use Zoom.
Okay. So are you saying that each teacher would decide to use their own platform that they're comfortable with?
Yes.
Wow, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, so my guess would be that the teachers will continue to use Zoom, because that's mostly what we've been using to meet as a faculty, and we're all fairly familiar with it.
Okay. Wow. It's just, the thought of that is whoa, because one of the issues with Zoom platform is not all the lessons you are able to transfer easily from one platform to another. That's interesting.
So there are still a lot of kind of bumps
Yeah.
that we need to figure out before we start school.
Yeah. Well, there are lots of bumps, lots of bumps. What time you say you had office hours, right? Well, what time the students were meant to come? We know they did not all come on, but what time they were meant to come on the platform?
They were supposed to meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Okay.
From my first group was from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, and my second group was 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock.
Okay, so it's only afternoon sessions you had.
Yes.
Okay. Why was that?
Because most of my students, well, those were my live math classes that I did. And that's when our math was typically during the day, was in the afternoon. So I wanted to at least keep that a little bit more consistent and not try and wrestle with kids not wanting to get up at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock because things were so strange. I wanted to give them that little bit of wiggle room where they weren't forced to get up super early and try and do something school related when a lot of them would have just been zombies.
Yeah, that's interesting because there was a report I saw a few weeks ago that teenagers need lots of sleep, and some of the American schools were trying to change the time school start a bit later because the 9 o'clock start, they were not getting the student fully engaged because they were so zoned out because of they need more sleep. So it's interesting that you actually factor that into your lesson so that you know that in order to get your student engagement, you needed to have your lesson in the afternoon. And did you feel that worked?
I did. It definitely helped because my students were awake and they were, even if they weren't answering my questions, they were at least present and paying attention. And
you know that they were there.
And that kind of circles back to what I had mentioned previously, that a lot of the times my students just like stared at their computer screens and didn't really interact.
It is sad though that sometimes you have a class full of children, young people, and they're not engaging.
Yeah, that's definitely a warning sign that something's not quite right and that I wouldn't have been meeting them where they needed to be.
Yeah, but in light of what is happening to them right now, is a situation where A, they cannot be bothered, and B, I also feel that some of them are suffering from psychological and emotional, I'm not too sure I could say depression, but psychological and emotional, deficits, for another word, because they're not where they're meant to be. So therefore, it's low morale, low self-esteem, cannot be asked, especially as you say that your students were not engaging anyway a lot in the classroom. So coming out of the classroom is even worse because you're not there with them. When you're in the classroom, you could nudge them. Oh, come on, do your work, and therefore you could have a little break. You cannot say that to them. They're deciding when they want to have a break, when they're ready to shut you off. So they were making the decisions.
Right. And even as an adult and as an educator, I was still feeling that kind of that depression or like that uneasiness because I wasn't where I was supposed to be either. So if I felt it, I'm sure the kids did too.
Yeah. And in some cases, they demonstrated it, because by not engaging, coming when they want to. So this is demonstrating that they're either overwhelmed and they cannot cope. So you did say that you actually reach out to them quite a bit. So therefore you had an idea that when they were not coping or when they were really suffering from overwhelm.
Yes. Yep. And I did that a lot through texting and emails with the students and the parents.
Right. You see, the other thing I kept saying to people as well, I was saying to my educators, when we actually transition back into the classroom, we will not be teachers. We would be therapists. We would be counselors, because those are the factors we need to address in the student and doing the intellectual input. Because they now come out under something that was very unusual. A lot of them have been locked in the house. So there's so many issues on that. So what are your opinion in relationship to when you transition back to the classroom, because you'll be going in there before me, what you see your role to be?
That is a very good question. I think probably the simplest part of my job is going to be teaching the material. I think that helping the kids get readjusted, helping them learn what is normal and procedures and expectations is going to be the struggle. So I think like the straight teaching, educating part of the job is probably going to be the simplest of what I need to do. But my students have not seen each other since the middle of March. So it's going to be a balance to find socializing time versus education time, and trying to get them back up to those standards of where they should be based on their grade levels and based on educational standards for the state and for the country.
You see, that's what people are not looking at, because those children are not ready academically to embrace the education, because something you point out is they haven't seen each other since March. And then, you're expecting to impact knowledge onto them, where their thoughts would be, me still, I'm not able to socialize with my friend. I'm going to do it, because you want to find that they're going to do it.
Right.
Because children are like that.
And my class was very talkative before they were put in isolation. So I can only imagine that they're going to be just as talkative, if not more.
Yeah, there would be a lot more though, because it's a situation where they haven't seen each other. That it's like opening a Pandora box when you go back. In terms of
there are just so many unknowns.
Yeah. And so many unknowns and so many things that we are not trained or prepared for. That's my issue. In terms of counseling, have your school have had any more counselors, or are they relying on the teachers? What have they told you guys? You're going back in the end of August. What have they told you guys?
We haven't discussed kind of the emotional or the social impact on the students. We're a very small private school, so we do not have any counselors or therapists on our staff. So that will fall to the teachers to support and coach and help our students deal with any fears or anxious thoughts about being back in the classroom. So that will be another role that the teachers take on.
Oh my goodness, you guys have no counselors in there because it's so small. So which means that instead of you supporting the counselors, you would be the counselors and the
Yes.
therapists.
Yep.
How do you feel about that?
It makes me a little nervous because I personally am I also am in therapy. And there are my grandmother unfortunately passed away just a few weeks ago.
Okay.
So I'm kind of still wrapping my head around that loss and
Yes.
dealing with being 2,000 miles away from my family. And those are thoughts that are weighing on me. But for me to support my students and to help them with their own fears, I feel like I'll just have to push mine out of the way. So I'm not entirely confident about the safety of going back to school at this point. I believe that my administration team is doing the best they can, and they're making decisions based on what they think is the best. But there are still just so many questions and just a lot of unknowns. So I'm almost kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like I pray and I hope that there are no new cases at our school and that the numbers continue to go down. But at this point, we just don't know. And it's hard to make plans and have expectations when we just plain and simply, we just don't know. But I would not be surprised if we were completely virtual within a few weeks of us starting school. That's kind of what I'm expecting, that we will end up closing our school and going back to online.
Okay. But you see, I keep on saying that to everybody. I saw when you actually started with the online, that was the training because we did not know what to do. So we actually had to learn what to do. But I still see this training. Now when we're going back and use it, we will actually be skilled now, much more competent in doing it because we've already got trained. We train ourselves.
And thankfully, the students will have more of an idea of what they're doing as well. So I think if we do end up having to go back to completely virtual learning, I think it will go a lot smoother. And I know that there are quite a few things that I would change. Like as far as my expectations with my Zoom meetings, teaching more live classes, and basically just even more parent and student contact.
It's interesting. Thank you. What 3 tips or good practice that you could tell any educators who are anxious like you are, who are now on the online platform because they're not yet finished with the online platform? What would you say to them?
I would say be sure that you set limits on your time. That's one thing that I failed at. I would be online working on assignments, creating videos into really late hours of the night. So just because you're not in the school building, you still need to have regular hours so you're not just wearing yourself down. The second thing I would suggest is making sure that you're communicating with your friends and your family members so you have social interaction with adults and other people who are there to support you. I don't think I would have gotten through those months of isolation if my friends across the country hadn't been so willing to Zoom and Skype and kind of share their struggles. So relying on support system is huge. And the third thing I would say is just be patient with yourself. You're not going to learn everything in one day. You will make mistakes. You will have parents who aren't happy with the way you're running things, but take it one day at a time. It will get better. You will adjust. You will learn. And it's not something that can be done in a day. So be patient with yourselves.
Yeah, that have come up quite a lot, the being patient with yourself. And self-care, how did you administer and how did you ensure that you were very proactive in relationship to self-care?
I wasn't, which was, it did not help me. I got sick, just a really nasty stomach bug that took me a long time to recover from. And I think part of that was because I was so stressed out and exhausted and not sleeping. So I have been a lot more careful to take time for myself this summer, give myself a break from work so I'm more rested and ready to jump into things. So this upcoming school year, I have my Saturdays set aside as kind of like me days, where I may go for a trip or I may stay home and watch Netflix all day. And I also have regular kind of movie nights scheduled with my friends across the country. And I could be working while I watch those movies, but I also have that person there to discuss with and talk to, and just have those people who are so important in my life not pushed out of the way because of schoolwork. Yeah.
So therefore you need to be very consistent in relationship to this is my me time and this is my work time. And I would urge you to do that while you're on the online platform as well, because educators leave self-care as way down the bottom, as if it is not important. It is so very important, because in order for you to pour from a cup that is full, you need to fill yourself up. And if there is nothing in you, you cannot give to your students. So that's something educators need to really pay attention to. Thank you. What would you take? Is there anything you're going to take to the physical classroom? Because you're going to be doing a hybrid setup, isn't it? Physical and online.
The communication is something that I need to take with me. So even though I will have students in my room every day and students online, I need to be checking in with both groups and both parent groups just to make sure that what I'm doing is working for them. Because if they're not engaged, if they're not understanding, spending my time on those lessons is not helpful to anyone. So just that I really need to work on my constant back and forth, making sure that what I'm teaching is understood.
Yeah, thank you. Right, what is your opinion on school opening?
I don't think we should be back in school yet. Cases where I am are going up, and I think that a lot of people aren't being responsible or taking it seriously. So I would prefer us to have another couple of weeks, start virtual, wait for some of these case numbers to go down. But at the same time, I also understand that the students learn best when they're in their classroom when someone can be with them to guide them. So I think it's a no-win situation either way, to have them virtual or to have them in their classroom. So I don't think there's any good answers right now, and it's just such an unknown. And I just hope and pray that no one at my school becomes sick or ill, and just that we'll be able to stay safe, and that our precautions and our temperature taking basically just lets us continue educating these kids as well as just keeping them safe.
Thank you. The interesting thing about it is this taking of this temperature with no new staff, because you are outside trying to take the temperature, the student is inside of the classroom causing chaos. You see, because that's what I'm seeing in my head. I'm seeing as, okay, you're outside the classroom taking the temperature. It's just one of you, while the students are doing whatever doing in the classroom, because they know that you are so wrapped up. You're not going to leave what you're doing to come and deal with them. So it's going to be a madhouse.
Yes. So that is definitely something I will need to think about a lot and give them really specific tasks to take care of in the morning, so they're not tearing apart the classroom while I'm taking temperatures.
Because regardless of whether or not you give them things to do, you still have the few that are non-engaging and the few that is going to cause havoc in the classroom, because Miss is not in the classroom. She is busy, and they know that once you're in the middle of taking the temperature, you're not going to be stopping, because you've actually just put it in the thermometer or whatever in a child's mouth or under the child's arm, etc., etc. And they know that you're not going to disrupt that to come and tell them settle down in the classroom. So yes, I see the need to take the temperature, but I do feel that that's an opportunity they need to put in teaching assistant or another teacher, or have, I don't know. I just have problem trying to see how that works.
And hopefully that's something that will be discussed a little bit more in our follow-up meetings, and hopefully get some extra volunteers to take care of that in the morning. But the way it sits right now, it is the teacher's responsibility. But there are still a lot of questions about how everything is going to operate once we start in 3 weeks.
Yeah, 3 weeks comes very, very quickly. I've noticed, we've been on lockdown from March, and I realized the time just went very quickly.
Right.
Especially when you have so many other things to do the Zoom meeting, do your classroom, plan the lessons. For you, it was easy because you guys were easy to transport your lessons. But some of us who have, been doing lessons in one format, we now had to, redo the lessons so I could fit into Zoom, learn the Blackboard. There's so many things, we had to learn as educators. And we've done well.
Yes, and it was
very well.
And it's taken a long time for me to be comfortable with the amount of work that I did during the last lockdown and online learning. But I'm okay with the work that I did now. I think that I did the best that I could have under those situations.
Yeah, because there's nothing else. There's nothing for us to measure it up against. Because right, this is sorry?
Because this is brand new.
Exactly. This is very new. We just measure it against, that's it. Against nothing. Because we don't know what it used to look like, because this is new to us. So we just measure it against what we did yesterday to what we're going to do today. That's why some of the educators that say when they actually did the expectation one day, they realize when they come onto the platform the next day, they have to say to the student, okay, this is a new expectation. This is what I expect of you, because every day there's something new coming up, because every day students are finding ways to manipulate this new platform, which we're learning. So every day you need to change your expectation because there's something new you didn't think about until it appeared.
Mhm. Yep, and it's just all of those changes and a lot of unknowns yet again.
Yes, 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 yes. And it would be even bigger when you go out into the classroom because the classroom now brings with it a whole lot of anxiety and a whole lot of overwhelm in terms of new setup and new situation. And it also brings with it a whole lot of anxious students. How you deal with all these anxious students, whereas when they were in the home with the parents, yes, they're phoning you up, but it's easy to deal with. Now they're in front of you. It's interesting. It's challenging, and I do feel sorry for us when we go back because I don't know how we are going to be coping with this. Because there are some educators who would have a lot more to do than others, depending upon the size of the school, depending upon the level of the students in relationship to whether or not the cases that the high risk students, etc. And plus, we also need to remember we need to look after ourselves. That is very, very important because if an educator becomes ill, it changes the whole perspective on things.
Right.
And that is something I'm not too sure people are really taking on board very seriously. Because if one educator becomes ill, it depends on the number in the class. It depends on, whether or not that educator was in the other class as well. There's so many issues to look at. Okay, are there anything else you want to say to us? Any more points you want to put across?
Not any more points, but I just wanted to thank you for setting up this platform. It's really helpful to kind of get my thoughts out there and to support and help other students and teachers who are in the similar situation as me. So I'm thankful that I have a place to share my ideas.
Thank you for accepting the offer. I'm really grateful because as many educators as possible, we need to share our experiences because this is what we actually do. This is what we've actually been going through. This is our experiences. No one is sharing it for us. That's what we all, have gone through. And it is so important that we tell it as it is. And as I keep saying, that people remember that we are human beings first, educators after. We are wives, we are girlfriends, we are, daughters, we are parents, we are all of those things. We are human beings first. People are forgetting. Yes, I hear some of you are saying that teaching is a vocation. Yes, it is a vocation, but that doesn't mean we should be at it 365 days a year. We should have a time when we switch off. And as much as we are all passionate about it, that doesn't mean that we should not have the opportunity to switch off. Someone said to me yesterday, people need to realize that educators, people who go into teaching, they're going to it because they love it, not because they have money, because no educators I cannot think of any educators driving a Bentley, right? So, some of us have nothing to drive and some of us are on public transport, some of us have cars, but none of us are driving a Bentley. So people need to realize that we've gone into this profession because we feel that we could make a difference to students, to people's lives. However, we should not be taken for granted. It is important because I do feel that, especially during this period, we have been taken for granted. And I keep saying to people that, yes, they were praising educators all year round. And I keep saying all the time, it's just a matter of time before they forget what we were doing and how much they were praising us. A matter of time is, it's just time to go back and they're already slagging us off. That we work shy, we don't want to go back to work. Who do we think we are? We're making so much demand. We are scared like everybody else. And we're not superheroes. Don't call me a superhero. I'm not a superhero. I am like everybody else. Right. This is not a moan. This is a fact. I'm just putting the record straight. So no one out there, do not see this as a moan, because too often when we start talking, people tend to see when we are talking and we say how it is, they say, oh, educators, there they go again, they're moaning. We are not moaning, we're just saying it as it is. Please do not misinterpret making points as moaning. Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Good evening, good night, good morning, good afternoon, where you are. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I do ask you to like, share, and comment. Like, share, and comment, because it is important for us educators to share our experiences with each other, because we need to also remember that we are not alone. We might be in different countries, but we are sharing very similar experiences. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll be back on tomorrow with another educator.